It is noon, June 1989, on top of a locked butte in northwestern New Mexico. A researcher is checking an instrument with nothing electronic in it, 3 sandstone slabs leaning against a cliff, and a spiral carved into the rock behind them. At this exact minute, a blade of sunlight is supposed to fall through the gap and cut the spiral through its center. It has done this on schedule for roughly 1,000 years. Today, the light lands in the wrong place. The machine ran correctly through 7 centuries of total abandonment. Then we found it, and within 12 years it broke. What that machine was, who found it, and how we broke something that outlasted an entire civilization, that is number 1 on this list, and it is worth the wait. Before we get there, an 80-ton boulder with the 10 Commandments carved into it in ancient letters, on a hill with nothing else on it. A prehistoric road that holds true north for 30 miles and ends at a cliff. And a 2-foot-wide hole in the ground that might be the most human thing ever found on this continent. More than 190,000 archaeological sites have been recorded in New Mexico. 13 made this list. 1 state, 13 sites, and not one explanation that has fully survived contact with the evidence. If you like the places that got recorded once and then filed away, subscribe. We post one of these every week. Let's get into it. Number 13. Aztec Ruins National Monument. Named after the wrong empire, and nobody fixed it. The Aztecs were never there, not near it, not in the state. In the 1800s, settlers coming up the Animas Valley found a 3-story masonry city with at least 400 interconnected rooms, reached for the only pre-Columbian civilization they had heard of, and called it Aztec. The builders were ancestral Puebloans. Construction began around AD 1085. Aztec East and Aztec West are the largest great houses outside Chaco Canyon, both modeled directly on Pueblo Bonito, and many ground floor rooms still carry their original 900-year-old wooden roofs. By the time the archaeology was settled, the name was on the ruins, the monument, and an entire municipality with letterhead. Nobody ever changed it. Then there is Earl Morris, who excavated the place from 1916 and became its first custodian. In 1933 and 1934, he rebuilt the Great Kiva from the ground up, 48 feet across, 14 outer rooms, at a cost of $12,451. It is still the oldest and largest reconstructed building of its kind, and regional tribal communities still hold ceremonies in it. Morris also built himself a house, partly out of material taken from the site. That house is now the visitor center. You buy your ticket to see the ruins inside a building made partly out of the ruins, in a town named after an empire that never came within 1,000 miles of it. Nobody involved seems remotely embarrassed, and at this point, why would they be? Remember the name Chaco, though. This list keeps circling back to that canyon, and the last stop on it is standing at the front gate. Number 12. 3 Rivers Petroglyph Site. 21,000 carvings, nowhere near enough people. 21,000. That is the recorded count on one basalt ridge in southern New Mexico, across roughly 50 acres of Chihuahuan desert between Tularosa and Carrizozo. Birds, fish, masks, sunbursts, handprints, geometric designs with no obvious referent at all. They were made mostly between about AD 900 and 1400 by the Jornada Mogollon, who pecked away the dark desert varnish to expose the paler rock beneath. Who made them is settled, unusually well. A partially excavated Jornada Mogollon village sits a few hundred meters away, and the same iconography appears on artifacts from that village. Same people, same period, same designs. What is not settled is the arithmetic. That village was small. A settlement that size, even over centuries, does not produce 21,000 images. The most workable explanation is that the ridge was never a local notice board. It was a destination. People came here, repeatedly, from well beyond the valley, for a very long time. Among the 21,000, there is a mountain lion with the tail of a snake. Nobody knows what it means. The site is fully open. 2 trails, a campground, a printed guide, and most traffic on US 54, driving straight past toward White Sands. You can put your hand next to a 1,000-year-old carving with no rope and no glass. The reason that still works here is that almost nobody bothers to turn off the highway. Number 11. Tsenkawi, the path that sank into the rock. Here's the thing about Tsenkawi. Nobody built the strangest feature on the site. It accumulated. The mesa is tough, solidified volcanic ash, soft enough to carve by hand, and, crucially, soft enough to erode under a foot. Ancestral Tewa people built a pueblo of about 350 rooms on top of it, occupied from around the 15th century into the late 16th. They lived on the mesa and farmed in the canyons below, same descent, same climb, twice a day, for generations, in yucca sandals or barefoot. Every trip took a few grains of rock with it. Over a century or two of ordinary commuting, the route sank, first a groove, then a channel, then a trench worn up to 2 feet or more into solid bedrock, so narrow in places that a modern adult has to turn sideways to pass through a passage worn by people going to work. Most of Tsenkawi has never been excavated, in keeping with the wishes of San Ildefonso Pueblo next door. Along the cliff base are cavadets, rooms dug into the tuff, their ceilings deliberately smoke-blackened to harden the stone. It is a 1.5-mile loop with 3 wooden ladders, off the road between Los Alamos and Santa Fe, a national laboratory a few miles west. You can put your boots in the same trench. Artifacts sit behind glass all over this state, and none of them get as close as a hole in the ground worn by somebody else's feet. Number 10. Comanche Gap, Galisteo Basin, the Wall of War Gods. There is a wall of black basalt running across the Galisteo Basin, formerly a volcanic dike, 3 long ridges rising 50 to 70 meters above the grassland. From a distance, it looks like something dropped there on purpose. The south-facing crest is covered in carvings. War gods, warriors with decorated shields. Warrior katsinas, horned serpents. Most were made between the 15th and 17th centuries. The shields are the detail worth pausing on. They carry bear paws and sun imagery, clan symbols tied to Pueblo warrior societies, and shields carved into a landscape have a long history as protective power aimed at whoever might be coming. On this ridge they sit high, on the outward face, looking away from the Pueblo world and toward the open southern plains. The Archaeological Society of New Mexico documented the dike in 59 separate 100-meter sections. Nobody has published a total. Whether it records real warfare, ritual warfare, or protection against an anticipated threat, scholars have never agreed. And then the naming. Comanche Gap almost certainly takes its name from Comanche raiders moving through in the mid-18th century, a century or more after the last warrior was carved. Somebody spent generations building a wall of images facing whatever was coming next. History then named the whole thing after the people who arrived after they had finished. Number 9. Sandia Cave, America's Piltdown. The oldest human site in the New World turned out to have cigarette butts in it. In 1936, University of New Mexico students Frank Hibben and Wesley Bliss began investigating a small limestone cavity high on the wall of Las Huertas Canyon, near Bernalillo. Hibben found a layer of distinctive points, which he named Sandia points, and beneath them what he read as a sealed sequence, a crust of stalagmite over an older culture nobody had documented. He estimated the deposits at around 25,000 years old. Time magazine ran it on the 6th of May, 1940, as the oldest human culture in the New World. Hibben was 30 and nationally famous within weeks. The problem is that limestone caves in the Sandias are full of rodents, and rodents dig. Work published in 1986 by C. Vance Haynes Jr. and George Agogino found the layers thoroughly mixed by pack rats and gophers. Modern debris, corncobs, cigarette butts, sat inside supposedly untouched Ice Age contexts. Radiocarbon dates from the so-called Sandia level came back at roughly 11,850 to 13,700 years. Late Pleistocene, not what was claimed. Then, in 1995, Douglas Preston published fraud allegations in The New Yorker, including claims that mammoth bones attributed to the deepest layers had come from somewhere else entirely. Hibben denied everything and threatened a libel action. No suit proceeded. UNM staff were later quoted saying they used the site to teach students how not to conduct fieldwork. The cave is still there. A sign trailhead off NM 165, a steel spiral staircase bolted to the cliff, about 20 feet of chamber before the dark takes over. No human remains were ever found in it. Remember Frank Hibben? He comes back later in this list, attached to something much stranger than a cave. Number 8. Gran Quivira, the city built where there was no water. Every large pueblo in the southwest sits on water. A stream, a spring, a river terrace, that is not a preference. That is the whole equation. Gran Quivira sits on a bare limestone rise 25 miles south of Mountain Air, at about 6,500 feet. No stream, no spring. And it was the largest pueblo in the entire Salinas province. What made it work was salt and position. The Salinas Basin had salt lakes, and the town sat on the hinge between the Pueblo world and the Great Plains. From roughly 1000 to the 1600s, it was a major trade center, linking Plains peoples, the Pacific coast, and the Great Basin. It could not grow what it needed, so it bought what it needed. That arrangement held for 600 years. Then the Spanish arrived. A mission in the 1620s. A resident priest, demands on labor and food. About 3,000 people lived here at Contact. In the 1660s, the drought came to a town with no local water and no surplus left to trade. In 1668, roughly 450 people starved to death in a single year. In September 1670, Apache raiders struck, 11 dead, 30 taken captive. By about 1672, the site was empty. The Franciscans had been building an enormous new church, San Buenaventura, with walls up to 30 feet. It was never finished. The masons stopped mid-construction, and the shell has stood open to the sky ever since, above a mass grave holding more than 450 famine victims. You can walk it today, 611 acres, a visitor center, a 0.6-mile loop, free admission, protected since 1909, and one of the least visited park units in New Mexico. A cathedral-scale ruin with a roofless nave, no town in any direction, and wind moving through empty doorways. Most days there is nobody in it. The building was abandoned twice, once by the people who left in 1672, and once by everybody since. Number 7. Pendejo Cave, the fingerprints that nobody wanted. In February 1991, a dig supervisor walked up to Richard McNeish, carrying something wrapped in aluminium foil. It was a toe bone from an extinct horse, from a meter down in the cave floor. The charcoal in that layer would later date to about 25,000 years. McNeish was not a crank. He was one of the most decorated field archaeologists of his generation, best known for tracing the origins of maize in Mexico. The cave is in Otero County, in the Chihuahuan Desert at the foot of the Sacramento Mountains, inside the Fort Bliss Military Reservation, a small, unremarkable opening in a low limestone hill, where the silence gets broken by nothing but military aircraft. His team excavated it from 1990 to roughly 1993, and what came out was extraordinary. Basketry, a pendant, stone and bone tools, extinct animal remains, and clay-lined fire pits that appeared to carry the finger and palm prints of the people who shaped them. A human hair came from a layer dated to about 19,180 years. The full radiocarbon sequence ran from about 350 years to about 55,000. McNeish announced friction skin prints he dated to upwards of 37,000 years old. That would have roughly tripled the accepted age of human presence in the Americas. The profession said no. Fingerprints are not a standard dating method. The layers could have been contaminated. The prints might even have been pressed by the excavators themselves. Septics visited the dig and left unconvinced. The animal dates going back 55,000 years are not disputed. Whether people were there with the animals is the entire argument, and it is still unresolved. McNeish died in 2001. The full monograph appeared 3 years after his death. And the name. The cave is named with a Spanish obscenity. the most explosive pre-Clovis claim in North America, is attached to a site nobody can say out loud on daytime television. That may be the only part of it everyone agrees on. If you are finding this interesting, drop a thumbs up. It genuinely helps. And if you have ever pulled off a New Mexico backroad because a ruin caught your eye, put it in the comments. Those leads become future videos. We are 6 sites from the top. Frank Hibben is about to come back, and the machine from the start of this video is still waiting at number 1. Number 6. The Shrine of the Stone Lions, Yapashi, the shrine that never closed. To reach it, you walk about 13 miles round trip from Frijoles Canyon, through a series of tough canyons with no water on the route. There is no sign at the end. No marker, no location on the Park Service website. Deliberately, staff will not give directions. That is not bureaucratic caution. Pueblo communities asked for it, because the site is in use. What is out there, on a mesa top, is a low circular wall of unshaped stones with an opening facing east. Inside, lying side by side, are 2 mountain lions carved from volcanic tuff, each about 6 feet long. Not rock art, sculpture, carved in the round at life size by the people of Yapashi Pueblo, a mile away, probably ancestors of the people of Cochiti, whose name for the place refers to Mokatik, the panther of Cochiti hunters. Yapashi was left in the 1500s. The village is a ruin. The shrine is not. Zuni people have traveled roughly 200 miles to reach it. Offerings are still left, turquoise chips laid over the carvings, and in some photographs, a ring of deer and elk antlers around the enclosure. Here is the part that reframes it. 5 centuries of weather have worn the lions down so far that visitors have mistaken them for lizards. People are still walking 200 miles to 2 shapes in the rock that no longer look like anything. The condition of the carving was never the point, and it took the rest of us about a century of studying the site to work that out. Number 5. The Folsom Site, Wild Horse Arroyo, the man who was right for 14 years. On the 27th of August, 1908, a thunderstorm dropped about 13 inches of rain on Johnson Mesa, most of a year's rainfall in an afternoon. The flood killed at least 15 people in the town of Folsom. The next day, George McJunkin rode out to check the fence lines. McJunkin was the foreman at the Crowfoot Ranch, born into slavery in Texas in 1851. He was self-taught, kept a telescope, and knew enough anatomy to look at what the flood had cut open in Wild Horse Arroyo and understand immediately that something was wrong. The bones were bison, far too large for modern bison, and buried far too deep to be recent. He was correct about all 3 things. For roughly 14 years, he tried to get somebody to come and look. The site required a 2-day horseback ride. Nobody made the trip. His cabin later burned, taking his collection of bones and books with it. He died on the 21st of January, 1922, in a room at the Folsom Hotel. 11 months after his death, 2 men finally drove out to the arroyo. In 1926, the bones reached Denver and were identified as bison antiquus, extinct since the Ice Age. And on the 29th of August, 1927, the excavation crew exposed a spear point sitting in place between 2 bison ribs. They did not remove it. They left it in the ground and sent a telegram, because the entire discipline had to come and see it where it lay, or nobody would believe them. At the time, most archaeologists thought humans had been in North America for 4,000 years. That afternoon added roughly 7,000 more. McJunkin was inducted into the Hall of Great Westerners in 2019, 97 years after he died. He spent 14 years asking people to ride out and look at something, and the honest summary is that the delay was never about the distance. Number 4. The Los Lunas Decalogue Stone, the 10 Commandments, 80 tons, middle of nowhere. About 35 miles south of Albuquerque, on a hill called Hidden Mountain, there is a basalt boulder weighing something like 80 tons. One face has been flattened, and carved into it are 9 lines of text. Most translators read it as an abridged 10 Commandments in Paleo-Hebrew. A letter group resembling the Tetragrammaton, HWH, appears 4 times. And there is nothing else. No settlement, No artifacts, no context, just a hill like every other hill in New Mexico, and then this. The earliest documented sighting comes from Frank Hibben. Yes, that Frank Hibben, from Sandia Cave, 5 entries ago. He reported first seeing the stone in 1933, covered in lichen, and said an unnamed guide claimed to have found it as a boy in the 1880s. That 1880s date matters enormously to anyone arguing the stone is ancient. It is also completely unverifiable, and it comes from a man later accused of fabricating archaeological data. Here is the detail everything turns on. Further up the same mountain, there is an unrelated piece of graffiti, dated by its carver, 1930. A mineralogist named George Morehouse used it as a yardstick, comparing how much the desert had eaten into the Decalogue inscription versus the 1930 carving, and concluded the inscription was many times older, somewhere between 500 and 2,000 years. That is the strongest technical argument ever made for the stone being real. Here is the counterweight. Analysis by Perkins and Kennedy notes the inscription mixes letter forms from multiple periods, regions, and languages, a combination no trained ancient scribe would produce. And every one of those letter forms had been published and available to a well-read student before 1936. So the same 1930 date that supposedly proves the boulder is ancient is also, almost exactly, when a well-read hoaxer could have carved it. The surface has been chalked and scrubbed by decades of visitors, so there is now less to study than there was. We have spent 90 years arguing about a rock, and the main thing we have accomplished is wearing it down. Number 3. The Chaco Great North Road. 30 miles of highway to nowhere. It is 50.5 kilometers long. It runs from Pueblo Alto, on the north rim of Chaco Canyon, to the edge of Coots Canyon, and it holds true north to within 1/4 of a degree the entire way. In places it runs as 2 parallel roads. For about 1.5 kilometers, it runs as 4. It was built in the first half of the 11th century by people with no wheels and no pack animals. Roads exist because something needs moving, and this road refuses that logic at every step. No major settlements along it, no camps, almost no trade evidence. The researchers who surveyed it called it overbuilt and underused. At ground level, it is largely invisible now, refilled by soil centuries ago. It was mapped from the air and by LiDAR. As recently as January 2025, a LiDAR study in the journal Antiquity identified new stretches of Chacoan Road 50 miles from the canyon. We are still finding them. Here's the detail that stops people cold. Near the end, after 31 miles of near-perfect north, the road deviates, deliberately, to arrive at the steepest edge of Coots Canyon rather than an easier one. There, at a 500-foot drop into Badlands, there is a stairway and a concentration of broken pottery. There is no settlement at the bottom. There is no destination. Read as engineering, the project is nonsense. Read as cosmology, it resolves immediately. North holds enormous significance in Pueblo tradition as the place of emergence and the place spirits of the dead return to. A formal, quadrupled route running north, ending at a staircase into wilderness, with pottery left at the top. We built roads to get places. They built one to face a direction. Nobody has produced a better explanation in 40 years. And notice where it starts. Chaco Canyon, the same canyon this list is about to end in. Number 2. Blackwater Draw locality number 1. Somebody held a child by the ankles. The people who run the site will tell you the wells were probably dug by children. Then they will tell you how. An adult holding a child by the ankles, head down the shaft. That is an interpretation, not a proven finding. But once you have heard it, you cannot unhear it, and the measurements do not argue. The shaft is about 60 centimeters across and 140 deep, roughly 2 feet wide, too narrow for an adult to work in at all. It sits on the Llano Estacado, between Portales and Clovis. Flat farmland, one of the emptiest horizons in the country, and a small building put up to protect a hole in the ground. At the end of the Ice Age, there was a pond here, and everything came to drink at it. Mammoths, camels, giant bison, and the people hunting them. The problem with a watering hole that every animal on the southern plains is using is that the water in it is foul. So somebody made a decision. Rather than drink it, and rather than leave, they dug down through the dry ground beside the pond to reach the clean water underneath. It dates to approximately 11,500 BC, the oldest known well on the continent. The site, discovered in 1929, is the Clovis-type site, and it was found because the highway department was quarrying it for gravel. Eastern New Mexico University bought 157 acres in 1978, and you can go and stand over the well today. It is still an active research site. 13,000 years of human presence in North America, and the single most human thing left in the ground is a 2-foot hole dug by someone probably too small to reach the bottom on their own. Somebody in that group thought the children deserved better water. That is the whole story, and it has not needed updating since. Number 1. Fajada Butte, Chaco Canyon, the clock that broke after 1,000 years. This is the machine from the start of this video. The road in is dirt for miles, washboard, impassable in rain. Then the country opens out, and there is a tower of banded sandstone standing alone at the mouth of the canyon. Cliffs rising about 450 feet, summit at 6,623 feet. Sagebrush, ravens, and then nothing. Chaco has one of the darkest night skies in the country, and a daytime silence that sits on your chest. On the southwestern face there is a scar running up it. That is a ramp, roughly 95 meters high, built by people with no wheels and no draft animals, for no practical purpose anyone has ever identified. You cannot walk up it. Nobody can. The butte is closed. Near the summit, 3 heavy sandstone slabs lean against a cliff. In the shade behind them, someone carved 2 spirals. The Chacoans left no writing that survives. What they had was a calendar problem. In a farming climate that thin, planting a week early or late can end a village. Somewhere between the 10th and 13th centuries, somebody climbed that butte and arranged 3 slabs so the light falling between them would cut the stone in a specific place on a specific day. Solstices, equinoxes, and, researchers concluded, the moon's 18.6-year standstill cycle, a pattern you cannot even detect without watching the sky for a generation. Then the canyon emptied out, and the machine kept running. Unwatched, unmaintained, correct, for roughly 700 years. In 1977, an artist named Anna Sofair was volunteering to record rock art in Chaco. She reached the panel near noon, about a week before the solstice, and saw a dagger of light bisecting the spiral. She founded the Solstice Project the following year. Documentaries were made, narrated by Robert Redford. The panel became famous. People came. 12 years after she found it, the slabs moved. That is the noon we opened this video with, June 1989. The summer alignment off. The winter alignment deformed. The cause, erosion around the base of the slabs, from the feet of the people who had come to see it. The butte was closed to everyone, and is now entered roughly once a year for inspection. The slabs are still up there. The light still comes through at noon on the solstice, and lands slightly in the wrong place, and will keep doing that indefinitely, with nobody there to watch it not work. It survived 7 centuries of being forgotten. It lasted 12 years of being appreciated. Whatever the lesson is, nobody in that canyon is in a position to enjoy it. 13 sites, and almost every road on this list led back to one canyon. A city with no writing that built clocks out of sunlight, and highways that point at the afterlife. For me, the one that stays is number 2. 13,000 years ago, somebody decided the children deserved better water, and the hole is still there. Which of these did you already know, and what did we miss? There are over 190,000 recorded sites in that state, and we covered 13. The best suggestions in the comments become future videos.